I'm all set except
We're already half an
Okay.
hour behind time.
for our reservoir. That other one, place that we're gonna fix, 30. We have like, we weren't completely topped off.
You ready, Steve?
20 to 24 hours.
Okay. So I will call the work session of the Oregon City Commission to order for Tuesday, September 10th, 2019. We did have an executive session of the Oregon City Commission prior to this pursuant to ORS 192-6602E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel L. Smith. Here. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
And Commissioner Frank O'Donnell will be here shortly, and then Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. So first item of discussion is future agenda items. Anybody have any future agenda items they want to add tonight?
I think I do. I don't know if it's an item or just a
Is
question.
it on that list of things that we're going to look at next?
List of things we're gonna look at next. No?
No?
What do you mean?
Well, the next thing is the list of future work session agenda
Oh,
items.
we're actually gonna, half the time we skip over that one on this future agenda, so we're making that an item. I'll wait for 2A.
Okay, so then we'll move on to 2A.
Mr. Mayor.
And let the record show that Commissioner O'Donnell has joined the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, please.
Yes.
Couple of things that I wanted to see if we could revisit in the future is we received some additional information regarding the right-of-way permit that was issued in Kenema, and I wanted to have staff respond to that information. And then the second thing was I'd like to have a further discussion about the ordinance involving food waste. I feel it's important enough that felt that our vote wasn't really reflective of what needed to be happening in the community.
So the right-of-way permit will be before the commission at the first meeting in October.
Okay?
And then I'll leave your discussion on food waste.
Well, the food waste, under Robert's rules, the motion to reconsider has to come from someone who voted in the affirmative of the motion.
I didn't say motion to reconsider. I just wanted to have further discussion among the commission about what's going on with that.
Okay. So moving on.
I'm sorry. Does okay mean that it's a new work session topic? Are there three? I'm sorry to do this. It's just-
Let's look at that in the context of this next discussion, which is future agenda items.
Okay.
So move on to 2A, 19-498, list of future work session agenda items. Mr. Conkle.
We're going to work on this process a little bit. It was just because.
Yeah, it's right here in black and white.
I don't necessarily have an update. We've outlined what's coming up next, for our next work session items. So I will turn it over to the commission for discussion.
Okay, you were listed as a staff, so, that's what happens.
Sorry.
Okay, now can I go?
Yes, Commissioner Lyle Smith.
I appreciate the levity.
So, my question was about our goals and objectives of the commission. And I was wondering if, because I know a lot of these items are tied to goals and priorities that we talked about in our retreat. So I'm wondering, have you scoped out like a timeline of when we think we're working on some of these goals, some of these specific items? Because I have items that I'm kind of holding, and I don't know if it's just that you're planning them in the second year of the biennium, or you like, if you've timelined it out. So I guess that's just a general question,
Right.
and it relates to these items.
Yeah. So the additional upcoming items that are on this list are a combination of some of the goals and objectives of the
Right.
commission, and then other things that have been added as work items. So I don't have all of the goals and priorities of the commission mapped out.
Okay.
Once we kind of get through with checking off one, we move to the next. And so I don't have the whole year and a half planned out. No, I don't.
Okay.
But
I guess my example, because I'm trying to decide, should I be putting stuff on this additional upcoming items list versus you have it in your hopper and it's just not on here. For example, parks deferred maintenance. This was a hot topic. We've talked about it a lot at the retreat. I don't see it in here, but I don't know. Maybe
Right.
it's in process and you see what I mean?
yeah, it's an in-process type of a product that we just, the capacity that we have, focusing on, Clackamas Co., we've kind of got a priorities these just because we've got to get one done. We're just out of capacity on some of these.
Sure.
And so that one is on, it's known, it's something that we're working on, we just haven't been able to push it forward. But if if that becomes the new priority, we'll have to kind of rearrange some of the other things that we're working on.
Okay.
I'm pretty comfortable with the first 10 items in the ranking on the right side. And I think having more than 10 items in our future agenda items is a pretty big bite anyway.
And, internally, just for scheduling purposes, I think we're getting into December, January, past that even, when we start trying to fit these in once a month.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is if you were to ask us if we wanted to put cross street and utility pole banners in front of the conversation about parks deferred maintenance, I think the majority of us would be like, no.
No.
We said that was a real hot topic and we want, so I'm just trying to balance. I know we have more things than we can possibly do. That's why I asked, have we looked at the goals and we said, okay, these are the main items that we said we talked about and we're plugging them in, and then everything else we're trying to fit in everywhere else, or?
That's the approach. We understand, we know what our goals and priorities are. We have that list and we know that we need to accomplish them. This is really the ads. And
Okay.
then there are some that, there's, like I said, a little bit of the overlap of some of the goals and commissions because we've got them and we're ready to go. We're just trying to get them onto an agenda.
So I shouldn't assume that it's not in your radar? Parks deferred
No,
maintenance.
honestly, the goals and priorities are the goals and priorities that we're accomplishing over the 2-year budget cycle that we've budgeted for. Quite honestly, a lot of these have been ads that we're trying to fit in.
Right,
So
okay.
in
I just want to
between
make sure we're
those.
not bumping anything that that previously prioritized because they're not on this list.
Understood.
So is everyone comfortable with staff using the first 10 rankings to add future work session agenda items, considering those probably aren't going to start until January of 2020 or 2019? No, 2020.
The first 10, sorry.
So on the right side, you have a ranking. So
yes, okay.
yeah. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable looking at that list to say those are, while I don't personally agree with all of them, I think that's a pretty good starting place for staff to look at what we think is most important that we haven't already listed.
Is there confusion as to which 10 he's referring to? Do you want me to read them
I can
off,
see the
or-
numbers,
Oh,
but I
okay.
can't, in my head, make them go in order of 1 through 10 or whatever the number is, because the first one starts with 2. So I'm sorry, I can see them, but
So number 1 was the code amendments, shelters. Number
Yeah, I see
2 was
that.
the Clackamas County Director of Housing and Housing Authority. Number 3 was the
King right-of-way.
Kenema right-of-way, obstruction in the right-of-way. Number 4 is the code amendment approach to short-term rental policy. Number 5 is the the CIP list, the capital improvement list for the water rate study and the SDC charges. Number 6 is the buildable land inventory and housing needs analysis presentation. Number 7 is the joint work session with PrAC regarding the Clackamas Park boat ramp. Number 8 was the Beaver Creek concept design and parks transportation needs analysis. Number 9 was the policies for nonprofit discussion, and number 10 was the available public parking and parking signage discussion.
I mean, if we took it in that order, generally speaking, took it in that order, that would pretty much cover all of 2020.
What was the public parking? That's not the shared parking thing.
It is.
Yes.
Oh, well, see, that, we need to implement that sooner than later.
11's right, like on the
Right.
That
agenda
could
right
be
now,
happening
too,
now.
basically.
So from staff standpoint, we have this list,
Yeah.
and we try to understand the priorities based on the rankings and try to move some of those up. There are some goals that weren't in the top 10 that we're still pushing forward. There's some things that we already have on the books that might
Right.
not be in the top 10. So I think I want to be assured that the goals and priorities are what we budgeted for.
How about if we do this? How about if you come back and just give us the, whatever the item is and what its ranking is in order, so we can look at it that way versus having to chase around.
Issues that we
Yeah, and
brought
then
up.
we can look at it at the next work session and give you a little bit more concrete feedback.
Yeah.
Okay?
And then my only other comment is, can we put the 1921 goals and goals documents and stuff on the website? I went out to the commission page today and it still has all 1719 stuff. And so,
Absolutely. That would have been my
That would be
mistake,
really nice.
probably. Yes.
thanks.
Okay, so Commissioner Smith?
Are we still on the same topic, but
Yes.
different? So to answer Commissioner McGriff's question about the food waste discussion as another agenda item to bring back, to me, we didn't preclude it from coming back. We had been told that we had a deadline of July. So they could bring it back anytime to then. I think my concern was, if they bring back a response to any of the concerns we have, that's the next topic. I think we were pretty clear.
Sure.
My concern was, what's it costing the city? Not just on paper what B&B thinks it might cost, which, by the way, we have no idea how realistic that is. We don't know what it's costing city staff. We don't know what it's costing in our budget, and we've set a budget without that included. I think that's crucial to know. So I think, without some of those big questions being answered, that's what I felt uncomfortable about. I also felt that B&B leasing representative was so uncomfortable answering the questions that I didn't know what that meant. Whether they're uncomfortable answering the questions because they don't know the answers, or whether they're uncomfortable because they're getting pressure from outside sources.
And Metro's their regulator.
Or whatever. So I didn't feel like we were getting a comfortable answer, and that made me uncomfortable. So, I'm not willing to talk about it until they come back with those responses.
Okay.
And I think they're welcome to do that anytime they want.
I agree with that, because too many times this commission sees a second presentation that's identical to the first, and a third presentation that's identical to the second. We don't have time for that. If you have another solution, you've refined the program, and you want to come back with a different explanation, you're welcome.
Well, I'd personally like to have our elected representative, not a staff person, come give us that information.
On Commissioner Smith's comment about what's it costing the city already, I know, and why and I have these conversations about accumulating costs against specific tasks, especially when they're mandated to us by outside governments. I'd like to know what those costs are too.
So I don't want to imply that I don't think it's a good program. That's not what my issue
Or
was.
do I?
Is there consensus to put, because I do struggle a little bit in terms of bringing back the same ordinance that's already been rejected unless the commission directs me to put it on the agenda.
Well, I think, again,
Or are you giving me the latitude to do that?
Sure,
commission.
as far as the ordinance is concerned, we still need to have the information from Metro that answers the questions that were brought up in the first and second meetings that we talked about this.
So is this a work session topic?
I would think this is a regular session topic. You're going to bring back the ordinance once, Counselor Lewis and the rest of the Metro folks have, answered our questions.
I think what we'd like to see is, has the program been refined further? Have the questions we've asked been answered in total?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're all seeing things differently. Each one of us up here have interpreted stuff differently, because I thought the ordinance was supposed to be passed this past July, and we are now late on that, which I'm pretty sure that is the July. At the same time, and I just lost my train of thought. So, yeah, I lost my train of thought. But so I see your predicament. Oh, I remember what it was. But I thought that the B&B folks had worked with our staff one-on-one. I mean, I got that impression that they had worked offline so that the uncomfortableness that maybe we were interpreting, maybe he doesn't like to speak in public, but I was hoping that our staff report, which kind of went over everything, was done in a comfortable setting that they could be honest. And my interpretation was that B&B actually wanted to pass the ordinance so that they could take it for a spin and get more detailed fees and cost information to bring back in July. So clearly they didn't interpret that, but I don't know if I'm off base or they're off base, but
Right.
we were not on the same page.
Well,
Right, it was supposed to be adopted in
honest-
July, and then we were trying to tie in the rate increase
For July.
For
next
July.
July, so that
For
we
next
didn't do it twice,
Right.
back to
July,
back.
All right.
what you said is exactly what I heard from B&B.
Yeah. So,
From the person who came for B&B, and I have information, having talked to other folks at B&B, that they aren't as comfortable as this gentleman
He
may
clearly
seem.
was not comfortable answering those questions.
Right. So, are you clear as mud?
Crystal?
All right, we'll move on.
definitely that.
Discussion items, PC 19-089, code amendments, LEG 18-000001, mobile food carts, Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. As you know, we adopted a variety of code amendments, and they were effective August 2nd, including some provisions that allow mobile food carts. During the adoption of that, the commission identified for staff the idea of bringing back mobile food carts to see if they should be allowed in mixed-use downtown outside of our downtown design district for permanent food cart pods. The commission has given us direction on that. Since that time, we got testimony from the Oregon Mobile Food Association, who expressed discomfort with the standards and their feasibility. And so we've met with them, and we have proposed code amendments for you. So Pete's going to go through the presentation, but at the end of tonight, we are just looking for direction from the commission. When we do come back to a hearing, are you okay with the direction we're going for the code amendments related to food carts? And then also we want to reconfirm our direction from the city commission that we do want to allow permanent food carts in the mixed-use downtown district, but outside the downtown design district. With that, Senior Planner Pete Walter.
Thanks. I'm going to jump ahead to the summary of the major changes. So based on the input we got from the
We're
OFMA,
doing short-term.
food carts?
first.
I didn't get another presentation. Did you have another?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right, we'll just talk. So, summary of the major changes. The intent was to make those consistent with our site plan and design review standards, and also our public utility hookup requirements, and also respect industry terminology and standards. So the first basic item was replacing the word cart with the word unit. And then there is a set of general standards that are applicable to both transitory and non-transitory food carts. And they have to do with such things as not discharging into city drains and things like that, compliance with stormwater and that kind of thing. And we're clarifying which site plan and design review standards are applicable to structures that are external to the food cart units themselves, such as, for example, fences, exterior building materials, temporary structures, parking and landscaping. Those kind of things have to be compliant with 1762. But the mobile food units themselves would not necessarily have to, they're going to be of different types of exterior materials. So we agreed with OFMA that it didn't make sense to regulate those things. Public Works gave us input on the utility hookups. A lot of the things that were taken out were things that were already regulated by the county health department, such as discharge tanks and potable water tanks. So we took the language with respect to those out to make it simpler. And so basically, transitory units and those units that are only open for less than 5 hours do not have to hook up to city utilities. Non-transitory units or permanent facility would have to hook up to permanent power, sewer, and water. And the screening requirements have been simplified, so that's another thing. Screening requirements for mechanical units external to the units, the food units, and generating equipment. So we hope that these will be a lot simpler for people who want to place food carts on a site. I do have, oh, here we are. The standards that are basically not changing are listed here. And we can go back into these if you want. What we'd like direction on is whether you feel any of these standards, whether they're the general standards or the design standards, need to be modified, or if there are any additional standards that you feel are important to keep.
Can you back up?
Yeah.
Okay. Nope. Okay. The 3 on a site,
Right.
is 3 a magic number?
3 units on a site at any one time. Is it a magic number? No, that's just the number that came out of our initial plan commission recommendation. Yeah.
Are you talking about just the section 2
Well,
or?
the previous slide, he had
So,
3.
yeah, for transitory mobile food units, which are the ones that are driving around, they're
Oh,
going to,
driving around.
you know, they're going to be on a site for less than 5 hours in a 24-hour period. And then non-transitory is stationary. They're going to go through a type 2 review process, and they're going to have some slightly more, they're going to have to hook up to public sewer and water and permanent power source and that kind of thing. Unless they're only open for 5 hours at a time, so they could be stationary, but they're only open, their windows open, they're only vending for 5 hours at a time. So Public Works felt that they could have onboard self-contained tanks in that situation.
What charges are associated with those that are hooking up to those public facilities?
That has not been determined yet, as far as system development charges go for these sorts of things.
We have worked with our public assistant city engineer, and he has contacted a bunch of other cities to figure out what they do. I think the general concern is if they're not hooked up to utilities, should they be charging an STC for that utility? They'll certainly charge STCs for other ones, but we're working through the methodology at the moment.
Or the landlord that provides that capability would probably have to pay in some form.
Correct.
So my question is, where are, in all this, having read through, I'm thoroughly confused, but where are food carts not allowed?
Oh, in terms of the zones?
Yes.
Right. So the zones that allow food carts are for transitory, meaning the ones that are driving around.
Right.
Mixed-use employment, campus industrial, and general industrial, and also the mixed-use downtown district outside of the design district.
So the design district's from 99 at the south to what, 15th at the north?
It's a little past
A
10.
little bit past
Okay,
that.
all right.
Yeah.
That's good,
And then-
thank you.
What about the college?
10's the Willamette
And
Falls.
then
College's campus.
the college has,
campus
can
industrial?
have those too,
Okay.
yeah.
So why would we,
Institutional
why would
zones.
we require landscaping for a food truck that's driving around?
Well, we want to make sure that it's not displacing or parked on the landscaping, and so.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
maintain minimum landscape, I mean, to me, that said, you have to, that kind of looks to me, again, planning, thinking,
Yeah.
maintain minimum landscaping, so what landscaping?
So if you have 15% minimum landscaping for your site in the zone that you're in, and we don't want the food cart to be taking up space where that landscaping minimum is supposed to be.
So
why,
just for
yeah.
general discussion, if we were talking about the front of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, that big grassy median between the Washington and the thing, you wouldn't want people parking their food carts on there.
They could if they were going to maintain the 15% elsewhere on the site.
Right, but
Yeah,
that- I was
yeah.
just trying to get
Yeah.
to the general idea of how
Yeah,
it
yeah.
works.
Yeah,
I
the
think it-
concern that we have is if you have pretty much a paved parking lot with one little patch of grass and we require a certain amount of
Right, a small
landscaping,
site.
we don't want that patch of grass to go away when
Well,
the
then
food
say
cart
that,
is
that
established.
doesn't say that to me.
Yeah, that's kind of summarizing, but I think you brought up a good point,
That's
Commissioner
right.
McGriff. Most of these changes, well, there's a lot of changes in this packet tonight, but a lot of them have to do with figuring out what are the standards and who has to maintain those standards. So from an applicant's perspective, is this the food cart that needs to know what standards have to apply to the food cart? Or, they're obviously working with the property owner, but are these property owner standards? And so we fundamentally reorganized all this code so it would be easier for food cart applicants to know what they're responsible for versus the property owner. To us, we don't care, somebody's responsible for it, and we'll review it in the permit. But on their side, we wanted to make sure that we were a little bit more transparent and easy for them to complete the work.
Commissioner Griff, you have some suggested language?
Well, I would say something to the effect of, the transitory food cart shall not be parking and landscaping. You just
Yeah.
can't do that. I mean,
There's no
a
net loss
shortened,
of landscaping.
Pardon?
No net loss of landscape.
Yeah.
Right, so
it says-
no parking there. That's kind of, don't park
That's
your
fine.
food cart, but let's say there's some landscaping grass like you talk about, Dan, in front of, let's say they wanted to put a chair out there for somebody to sit on if they were, that's not, to me, grass wouldn't be messing up the landscape.
Right.
So, yeah, I think I would say, yeah, they cannot park or displace any landscaping that is required to meet minimum landscaping requirements.
And that would be for the property owner, for the cart, or the unit, excuse me, let's use the term unit.
The geographic location.
For the owner.
Yeah.
For the site.
It's lumped with the site requirements as opposed to the requirements for the cart, but we'll review it together as a package. There is a provision that says, quote, not result in the reduction of landscaping less than the minimum site, and that we are not proposing to change. So the language in the code is a little bit different than what we summarized on there.
So the design standards under section C, you've got transitory mobile food cart, so that, all of that would apply to the cart, the unit itself, and then you've got non-transitory, and then where would be the section that applies to the property owner?
The general requirements is most of them, so that's where they all got lumped together.
Okay, under B,
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were some before and some after, and now they're all together.
are you interested at all in sort of making that clearer that that applies to?
Absolutely, yeah.
Who, because if I was a mobile food cart unit person, I'm not sure that would be super
So
clear.
it's in terms of applicability to the,
We did talk to them about the difference between the code and the application
Application.
form. We'll make sure that we're going to continue to work with them
Sure.
on the development of the application form. We have one now since we allow them now, and I think there's some improvements that we can do.
Okay. I think generally this looks pretty decent, just, make sure it's kind of in English.
Anyone else have any suggestions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ray or Pete, can you tell me on number 2, the non-transitory mobile food units, that first sentence that was added to me is confusing, and I'm not sure why it was added. This is some scenario, I think this is a scenario of, I'm not sure what it is, so can you describe it?
Which one, Rachel, are you talking about?
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Second is,
so that was added,
C2.
yeah, it is a difficult sentence, but basically it's making the differentiating between placement of a unit on a property as opposed to the window on that unit being open. So it might be a stationary unit and it's going to be there for more than 5 hours at a time, but it's only going to be operating for 5 hours during that 24-hour period. And in that situation, they're wanting to let them use the transitory mobile food cart option, which means you might not have to hook up to public utilities or permanent power source.
That doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. I mean, if they're gonna be there permanently, why, I mean, any of the food carts could say, well, I'm gonna operate 4 hours, or, you know, this day I'm gonna operate 6. I mean, I don't, I guess I don't understand. I'm not,
Well, Public Works didn't feel that if they're not going to be providing as much of a burden on the utility system because they're only open for 5 hours that was their thinking. Yeah. And
It seems to me that the thinking should be that if a cart is going to be there
Permanent.
every day,
yeah.
no matter how long it's open, that should be this,
Yeah.
more than 48 hours or whatever, something like that,
Yeah.
to get us away from the 24-hour requirement. But, if somebody's going to park there for 3 weeks, even if they're only open 5 hours a day, that still is going to
Either
burden the
permanent.
utility in some way.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can go back and talk to Development Services about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like rather than trying to come up with an hours of operation,
Yeah, it's, you're
Either
either
you're
permanent
there
or
or you're
you're,
not.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
either permanent or you're or
if you
not.
choose,
That's my
if your
thing.
business model is 1 hour a
Let's make
day.
this the
Yeah, I
least
feel like this is
subjective as we
that
can.
one is like walking the line, and it's, you
And
know.
somebody would game the system.
Yeah, I'm like, you're either permanent or you're not, right? You either follow the permanent rules or you don't, right?
Commissioner Smith?
We'll remove that.
Certainly clear.
So a lot of my thoughts on this are based on the old food cart program that we had all the issues with. So I'm trying to refresh my memory on all that. I guess one main question is, what is the way to, what is the process through, I guess the old food cart program was very specific, and this is these are what the criteria is for what they look like. They're freshly painted, they're, they look whatever, so someone's not bringing in some,
Falling apart thing.
trailers falling apart or whatever. I assume that signage all goes under the typical sign code and all of that, but in terms of, what these units look like, is there any expectation that we're having a standard that it is at a certain level in terms of the way that these things look? The only even thing that I can see to that is that, the screening and that kind of thing, which I guess I'm kind of wondering why the screening is why it's labeled as saying to the height equal or greater. Well, why doesn't it just say or greater? If you have screening that's supposed to cover a visual eyesore of a generator and it only comes to the top of it, it doesn't really cover it. It doesn't really screen it. So then what's the point of having a screen if you're still seeing it, and unless it goes beyond that to actually screen it out? But, at least I think that I'm wondering why there isn't some just basic standard of, if someone parks a trailer there and it's permanent and with, it's a complete eyesore and it gets worse, and, is that a code enforcement kind of thing? Just based on a vehicle or something that we have the capability of going in. So it might not be listed here, but there might be some other way to say, okay, well, your trailer's been parked there, it hasn't been opened, it looks horrible, and,
So to become a storage area, right?
right, I mean,
A neat, clean, and finished appearance.
because the food cart
which-
ones were very specific. It was like, they need to look like this, and they need to, you know,
Yeah, but, you
We
know,
don't wanna
I
go
know,
there,
I don't want to
I know.
go there, yeah. Okay.
but there's a balance.
All right. Anything else from anybody?
I just had a question.
Oh, I
So
did have one more, sorry.
having seen the food cart pod, the one in Beaverton and the one that's in Happy Valley, did they have a standard for what they wanted for appearance? Because those look really nice.
Happy Valley, yeah.
The city of Beaverton was a city, that's the city food cart there, so the city did it itself, the one by City Hall, I think is what you're
yes.
talking about. And so that was one of their first ones, and so they put in a lot of provisions and design standards for it. Did a mobile tour and went to that food cart through a planning conference, and they gave us a lot of suggestions of things to think about. And so some of those standards in this code reflect that, like loading areas, since they all have different vendors and loading. So to answer your specific question, they did have a lot of control because they paid for it.
Okay. What about the Happy Valley one? That one's private.
I'm not aware of that. I'd have to look into that.
They all have a nice, clean, finished appearance. They're not anything that looks terrible or junky.
How does this apply within public parks and properties?
If they're zoned institutional, it would be a permitted use.
It would, but it would,
Yeah.
and then to come through a process through
Yeah, and then there's a special event permit
for just temporary.
for temporary events and things. Yeah.
So say
Which is
that
completely
first part to me again.
So if you're an institutional zone, we allow both kinds.
Parks are institutional.
Sometimes they're residentially zoned. So
Well, I
if
guess
they're-
the question is,
Well, it seems to me the parks are parks under chapter 10, and
Yeah.
the rules under chapter 10 would apply. So if you're going to try to put a permanent food cart in a park, it's going to have to go to the vote of the people.
well, I'm just asking a question because we've had food carts permanently or semi-permanently in city parks that were violating
At the end of
our
our
own
trail.
rules.
Right.
And so I don't know, is it in our charter that specifies that or somewhere?
Charter chapter 10
Specifies-
specifies what can happen in a park.
Right.
And I argued that with David Frazier.
Yeah, and we
Prior.
had the same issue with a boat docking up onto the boat ramp or, you know, docking there and selling too. So I just want to see how this all goes with city parks and park property, I guess.
Well, the difference is the boat comes under the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
So both that was selling?
Yeah.
Yes, there was, docked up on, yep.
Up at John Storm Park, I think, or something.
There was a lot of
idea.
issues.
I had no idea.
We
All right, are you guys, do you have any more questions? Anything else you want to offer on this? Then I assume we'll see this back on a regular city commission agenda sometime
In
in the
October.
future? Okay, great. Then we'll move on. Code amendments, short-term rental policy, development approach. Ms. Turbo, before you get going, and Parna disappeared, but I read an article in, I think it was Pamplin, this last week where the city of Portland has actually come to an agreement with Airbnb about sharing data so that then the city can go out and enforce their rules. I reached out to the mayor's office. They sent me all their details, the code language, most of the discussion. I passed that all on to Mr. Parno. So, I'm not sure. I think we ought, as far as the development approach, let's look at Portland and a couple of other places that have gotten to where they're going to be semi-successful. I'll tell you right now, Airbnb and the rest of them will only be drugged to the table, kicking and screaming with the pitchfork between their eyes. They don't want to do this.
Right.
So with that,
I agree with you. I sent Laura an email saying that I saw the same article. I said, let's get the Portland stuff. So if you've already done that,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Sure.
And I said, let's look at Cannon Beach and maybe one of the other beach towns. Cannon Beach has gone through a lot with this. So there, I think they'd also be a good example.
Yeah, I
But
think Cannon Beach is a little extreme, but
Well, it, again.
for their area.
Yeah, but that's their area. Maybe there's some stuff we can take out of that, but I agree with you that we need that information before we can actually even talk about this. But I read all your stuff, so
Okay.
it's,
I don't know that there's a whole lot of discussion we have, but go ahead, Mr. Ray.
All right, so I'll do an intro and then Pete can go through the timeline. So during our code amendment process, we identified, the planning commission recommended staff broaden the code amendments to include regulations for short-term rentals. The request is that they make it an easier or less onerous process and that we add additional standards as needed. Right now, in residential zones, if you want to rent out one of your part or all of your house, if you rent it out for less than 30 days, it requires a conditional use approval through the planning commission, which takes time and money. And so this request would be to look at different ways to do that through potentially a different process and then add more specific standards. That request is forwarded to the city commission. Through the code amendment process, city commission then forwarded it to the goal setting retreat. At the goal setting retreat, the direction from the commission was to set it aside until after the comprehensive plan update. Then so we didn't include it in any goals, either through as a department or in our citywide goals either. Then during the code amendment process, the city commission directed staff to put it back on this project. And so now we're here because we want to provide a framework for you for how we're going to approach this. As you've already started to allude, this is complicated and it can take cities a very long time. We have a limited amount of resources. We have 4 people in the planning division and most of our time is spent during development review and answering public questions, but we also have Willamette Falls Legacy Project, Beaver Creek Concept Plan implementation, you name it, lots of projects going on, and our comprehensive plan update, which we've already started.
So let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't know that, and I'm asking this to the commissioners here, I don't know that this is a big enough issue for us to, given the limited amount of revenue we're going to get from the transient room tax on these places, is it really a big enough issue to push something else that the planning department has down the list to work on this?
Well, I guess my only response to that was how far does that mean we hold on it? Because if we know how daunting this process is and we know it's going to take a while, where we're getting to the point now in Oregon City, we're a year or so away from breaking ground on the Riverwalk. We have all these other things coming. We want to make sure that this is moving along to be essentially figured out before we get to a place where the amount of,
Yeah, I understand
so
what you're
I don't want to
saying.
set it off enough that we're so behind on it that we're not keeping up with it to where we get to the point where people are coming into town.
My
Because
thought-
people clearly are coming into town a ton,
Yeah, I have one
now.
next door to me, so.
so I guess that's my only worry.
The biggest problem with enforcing any of this stuff is that we have to have a way to get the data
Right.
from things. And if you go on Airbnb or VRBO or one of those sites, it'll tell you the general area,
Right.
like the Portland
Right.
metro area, but it won't tell you this house is in Oregon City.
Right.
Even if you ask for houses in Oregon City, it doesn't give you houses in Oregon City. So it's really tough to find out.
Where
So
they
the
are.
agreement, now Mr. Parner finally shows up. The agreement is going to have to be between us and the
Right.
various companies. And I think that, given the information I got to Mr. Parno, and I can certainly put him in touch with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and there is one active subcommittee on that is currently working on these issues for places smaller than Portland, San Francisco,
Right.
Seattle, that have some best practices. I think between Mr. Parno and Ms. Turway, they could kind of use this as a side project for a year or so while we're doing the regular stuff. Does that seem like a reasonable way to go about this? Because it's really about the money. So I really put this in Mr. Parno's hands more than in Ms. Turway's, as far as, because the only reason we're talking about this is for the revenue. Otherwise, we really wouldn't be interested. Commissioner Griff.
well, I partially agree with that, but I see this as an issue of livability. I did mess around online and I found I know of several of them in my neighborhood because people have told me. Plus, I'm outside doing something and people walk by and they ask me questions and I go, oh, well, where are you? And then they tell me where they're staying and I know that that's not legal.
Right.
I think there's, in addition to the revenue, is a livability issue. I've got somebody down the street from me that is running a rooming house and people are coming and going at all hours of the night. They have garbage piled up. It is an enforcement issue. But I guess if we're not going to do, I agree with you that we have a lot on our plate, but we need to get across to our community that either it's going to be allowed and there's a free-for-all, or this is not allowed, and if you're doing it, there are consequences. Because I think that people should, in the neighborhoods or wherever they're doing this, unless the county has an ordinance, and I have a friend who does have one out in the county, but it's regulated, they have permits, it's all of that. It's all these people that are doing it underneath the wire that who knows whether they're inspected, whether they're safe.
Well, how about this then?
I like to know who's coming in, you know, who my neighbors are. And not that these people are a danger to anybody or anything like that, but again, it gets down to livability.
Well, there are many examples, not necessarily in cities our size, but in other cities where these places have turned into, you know, massive parties and gunfights and all kinds of other bad stuff. My suggestion would be that if we're going to look at it black and white like that, I would say that we ban these things for a year or 2 years until we have the opportunity to work through the process. And if we discover somebody that's doing one, then we, you know,
Chat with them?
you chat with them first, and then there's some kind of a fine or something else that would work with that, so that gives us time to work down the line.
Are you talking about the M word? The M word?
No, I'm talking about it would be illegal to do that in Oregon City.
Well, a moratorium would be kind of the same thing. It would be.
Well,
Can't do
the
it.
moratorium holds special
Okay,
place
yes,
in
no,
the state
you're-
law.
You are correct. You're correct, yes.
So we would just not allow these vacation rentals, and these are the consequences if you're caught. And then that gives us a year or two's time frame to, do you see anything unworkable about that, Mr. Conkle?
And I will say we had 2 or 3 B&Bs in the McLaughlin neighborhood at one time. And they operated great. I mean, it worked great. Everybody knew about what was going on.
Right.
There was no issue. They had permits.
As a CU, right?
Everything was
That
super.
the problem is that was
That was
in the analog days, and now we're in the digital age, and the digital age allows people to do all kinds of things under the wire of local regulations.
Well, I don't have any problem with what you're suggesting in terms of putting a delay on it and go for it.
So right now, so I guess, just thinking through what's on the code right now, is if we were made aware, we would contact, and it would be an option of getting a conditional use permit, which exists on the books now, or stopping the activity.
Perfect.
So, but I guess I'm not,
That's the way it is.
We do that right now.
so
We're
If you
already
ever made a
enforcing it.
complaint, there's already a process.
yeah, I guess I'm,
Right.
but I would continue to do that
What
on a
happens-
complaint basis.
Right, so what happens if you go there, you tell them they have to have a conditional use permit, they choose not to, but then they continue to,
Right, then you're into an enforcement action.
okay, well, then it sounds like we've got it covered for right now.
I feel we've got what we need.
Yeah, I do. It's fine.
And then we move forward with a slow and deliberate pace on figuring out, reaching out to, I'll send you the contact for the U.S. Conference of Mayors on this. And, they have some model ordinances and things, and we craft something in a couple of years that meets our, desires.
I guess what I'd propose is that if we are successful in discussions with Airbnb, VRBO, whoever else that it may be, right, all of a sudden, we're potentially going to have data on uses in the city. I think at that point, we probably do have to have a discussion
Well, yeah.
before we go knock on however many it is doors and say, come get a CU or shut down.
Well, I think, to be honest, I think the conditional use permit is probably a little extreme given the circumstance. 'Cause it seems like that's like $5,000. Yeah. So, I mean, we would have to put in place another process for them to file and get permission and all that. And maybe it's, $250 a year or something like that. But, the eventual intent is that we capture the transient room tax on these as well as the regular hotel rooms that can't hide the fact that they're hotels.
Sure. Understood.
Clear?
Yes.
Are we okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Can I just clarify one thing? So we put together a framework to address this now. We're going to table that. We'll continue to work with the providers of these services. When we find out more from them, we will come back to you. If not, we'll keep watching and making sure it's on our project list, and we'll talk
Sure.
to you about it after our comprehensive plan update, before the Riverwalk opens.
Right.
Something around that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Or around that time.
Mr. Parno?
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry I was late to the party on this discussion. So I agree with everything. I appreciate the mayor and the commission and the direction there, and appreciate also Laura and Pete's effort in that direction. And I just wanted to clarify that I agree wholeheartedly with Commissioner McGriff in the sense that there's two conflicting sections of code now. If you recall, our management analyst, Ryan Brady, put together code language before some of you were on the commission a few years ago that allowed us to, in some regard, to pursue intermediaries. And in that sense, we also have a code section that prohibits short-term rentals without a conditional use. So currently, and thank you, Mayor, also for all the information you provided, because we're using that. And it's much appreciated. And then I just want to be clear with the commission, two things. One is, thanks to the mayor, we're making some headway, but it's a long mountain to climb in that folks like Airbnb will talk to the city of Portland, but we reached out with 100 letters. I'm exaggerating. 5 letters though, 0 response to the folks that came to the mayor's conference and said, reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk to you. They did not. And just 2 more points and then we can move on. The legislature passed a House bill that said the state will have information that we can all do a sharing pool, but the state explicitly prohibited finance from sharing that information with community development in the sense that I asked and said, in the now statute, it says this information can only be used for collection of taxes, but for no other purpose. However, I have a community development department that's working on a process. Can we share the information? They said absolutely not.
Let him send the Attorney General to find us.
I understand. And the last point that I wanted to make is just that to have the commission be aware, of course, at any time during the process in following your direction, I appreciate Laura being aware that some neighbors could come in when they try to follow the right process, find out that the conditional use process costs so much money, and be right in front of you with a concern. And we'll address that when it comes, but there's a possibility by following the direction that we're under now, which we will, that at some point we may get sideways of a neighbor or two.
Right.
Fair?
I thought we reduced the fee for the conditional use permit in the fee list.
You wanted to talk about the conditional use fee when we come back later. We were going to talk about it as it relates to shelters.
Right.
So when
Well,
we
this
come
is-
back,
Okay,
It's-
it's not this, I don't consider those shelters, so, okay.
it's slated for November. I think
Okay.
we were going to add it to the fee discussion.
Okay, so we're done with that. I am going to bail at this point. I've done all I can do today, so if you want to stay and give the updates for the individual folks, have at that, and our next regular meeting, I will update you on my things.
Very good. We'll move on with the city manager's report, if any.
Nothing for tonight?
Nothing? Rather than go through these line by line, are there any commissioners that wish to give individual reports on their committees on which they serve?
Mine are super brief.
Why don't you lead off then, Commissioner
me
McGriff,
to
if
go
you're
ahead?
ready? Certainly.
Okay, let's see, I have the Downtown Oregon City Association. I have been attending their board meetings on a regular basis and participating in discussion. We have discussed paring down what they do. I think that's totally appropriate, and that's where the board is going at this point in time. We are working on, soliciting isn't the word I want, in interviewing new board members. We've done that and have a couple people coming on board, and there's still more out there. We're going to be doing some outreach to some of the business owners on the street, and I volunteered to be one of the people that goes with the director or the staff to go talk to people. The other committee is that Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area participated in the 175th. I partially staffed their booth first before I came to our booth. And we had lots and lots of people. So what I did want to tell you is that if you use the name Willamette Falls, people are going to get your project mixed up with other projects, which like we're all shocked by that. So I spent a lot of time talking about the Willamette Falls Legacy Project at that booth because they stopped there first and said, what's going on at the mill, you know? And so I da-da-da-da-da. And, but it was, we had lots of people. People were fascinated by the Louis the Lamprey. I will say for the record, I did not touch Louis the Lamprey because it was a weird tactile surface, so I did not go there. But the kids loved it, and we handed out gummy worms for them to enjoy. I will say for the 175th, just to give more kudos to the staff, while it's not in my report, I thoroughly enjoyed being in the city booth, and it was fantastic, and I appreciate all the work staff did. If I had 2,500 t-shirts, I could have sold them all. Every time somebody showed up in an Oregon City t-shirt, I want that, I want that. So Kristen made that available to the public. Hopefully you'll get yours ordered before September 13th because it's a deadline. It'll be delivered here. So get online and get that t-shirt.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
All right, well, I'm going to report because I took the time to write down my notes so that I was prepared. CIC, Citizen Involvement Committee. We have not had meetings in August or September, but I, along with Commissioner O'Donnell, did meet with a couple of citizens about the CIC and to discuss some of their concerns. Some of the concerns I wasn't surprised about. I've already had conversations with Amy Wilhite, who is the chair of the CIC. And I think, you know, changes sometimes are slow to make. But I did understand their concerns, which were generally about the structure or participation or lack of participation, trying to encourage more participation, talking about the structure and the voting membership. So I essentially, I think in the end, we were both at that meeting, just recommended that they circle back to the CIC and talk with the CIC about their essentially suggestions for improving it. And it was a discussion that should happen at a CIC meeting. So hopefully they will do that and follow up, which I'm pretty confident that they will. Did you want to make any comments on that?
Only that we basically left those parties present, Barbara Rankin and others, with a set of tasks, and that they need to follow up on their end and then present their desires as a whole. And that involves maybe restructuring their number of voting members. And it may involve how those voting members are selected, who does that selection, whether it be the mayor or the commission as a whole. Or do they select them and bring them forward? So we'll have those discussions after they run it through their own CIC and bring it forward as representative of the wishes of the CIC.
Rachel,
C4.
before you move on, I just want to say for the record that I also met with a group of, not the same people you met with, but I met with a representative from this
CIC.
little subcommittee.
Okay. The C4, which is the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, I'm the alternate for the mayor holiday. I attended that meeting last week. That meeting focused on the county housing needs analysis, housing affordability and the historic inequalities in housing and preserving manufactured home sites, communities. Interesting enough, Oregon City was one of the few cities that was called out about trying efforts to try to preserve mobile home communities. I do think there's additional steps that we've talked about as far as going so far as designating mobile home communities as a zone, so therefore they are protected against future development. So there was some discussion about that at the county level with all of the city representatives. So I think there's a push in that direction because we all recognize it as an affordable housing option. And so for C4, the next two meetings will focus on transportation, but in December, we're gonna return back to the housing topics, and there are a couple of different housing workforce groups and stuff like that they are essentially gonna compile all of the policy recommendations from their task group, from the county HNA that they did, and come back in December to kind of review what are policy options that cities and the county itself can and probably should consider to improve housing and affordable housing options within their jurisdictions. So more to come on that, interesting topics. And I think, Laura, you are planning to present the housing needs analysis for Oregon City to us, right, pretty soon?
Yeah, it's still draft, it's not final yet. So once it's final, we were talking about it today, it keeps sliding on the schedule.
Yeah.
Once it's final, we will.
Which is, go ahead.
Is that something that you can get to us so we can read it ahead of time? I mean, obviously, I am keenly interested and was very interested in it when I was a planning commissioner, and was very concerned that we didn't have it before we got into the equitable housing discussion.
Sure, I can send you a draft, and it's the intentions to wrap that into the comprehensive plan update so we can have a community conversation, which will actually affect how we do the H&A. We'll want to further it more, and then you'll see. But yeah, I'm happy to send you a draft.
Yeah, the challenge is that, Clackamas County is saying that the H&A is done. And they looked at all of the city representatives and said, have you reviewed it? Has your city commission or council talked about it? And I'm like, last I heard, ours was still draft. And so I'm trying to figure out, I guess, why you're saying it's still draft, and they're trying to encourage all of the city commissions to be talking about it and moving forward, and they're saying everything's final. So I feel like there's a disconnect, but I don't know. I trust you if you say it's draft, it's draft. Just know that
It
that
is
was
draft.
Just know that that was the message coming out of the meeting to all of the cities, that they thought that all of the city commissions should be talking about it because they all had final products and stuff. So, yeah, it was, I was puzzled by that, so. Okay. And then my other committee is IMPACT, which is the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, and they have not met recently. The next meeting is tomorrow, which unfortunately I will miss the September 11th remembrance because Ms. Turway is presenting at Impact tomorrow evening. I saw her on the agenda, and I kind of felt like an Oregon City elected should be at the meeting to answer any policy questions for Metro, to kind of back her up, or not that she needs backup, but, from a policy perspective. So I had to make a choice, and so therefore I will be at Impact tomorrow for that. That's it.
Very good. Any other reports by others?
I just mentioned that Clackamas Heritage Partners was focused mostly on the 175th event, which was really great. So I was there all day. And then I just want to say South Fork hasn't met for the summer because we're making water. But I just want to, just relay the thanks for all the staff, John Collins, South Fork, Public Works, our city manager. I guess the big reaction today was hearing several people say, well, I didn't even know we had a water line break. That's how amazing what happened this weekend was, to have something that major happen, and to have it fixed quickly and not affect service in the city in any major way is incredible. And that's why we are so happy about where we're at with South Fork and the ability for South Fork to react quickly and effectively. And as far as I know, it's already fixed. There's some repairs still for the road and things like that. But to see that happen and be basically resolved over a weekend is absolutely incredible.
I certainly agree with that. I find it amusing sometimes that when these crises are averted and they don't come to the public knowledge, there's very little credit garnered. But jobs well done that go unnoticed. So my thanks to all.
It's on the news.
I know, but it still goes unnoticed.
You would not tell, so many people told me, oh, I saw it on the, news flash or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, okay.
But they still turned
Yeah.
on their water and
Yeah.
they
And
still
flushed their toilets.
flushed their toilets. Yep.
Well, with that, I adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.